Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to City Current's virtual Get On Board nonprofit workshop. I am so pumped to have you all here. We're about to dive into some fantastic insights on building a succession culture in your organization. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfortable, and let's get ready for an amazing session. I see that people are warming up the chat. Good morning, Ernestine with the CC Foundation. Thank you for partnering with us to make this workshop quarterly a reality. Thank you for tuning in, Allison, as well. So as you come in, go ahead and let us know where you're tuning in from in the chat. Got people coming in right now. All right. It's hard to believe it is already November. Mentally, I'm still in April, but I think if you're working at a nonprofit, you may also feel the same. But you know what? It is a great day to learn about building a succession culture. And we have My City Rides joining us today. It's great to have you as well. Good morning. We will get started in about 2 minutes. And so this is your 2-minute warning. So go ahead and grab a cup of coffee, get settled, get your notes out. We'll have some great information today from Philip Walkley and Sonji Branch joining us today, talking all about succession culture, building a succession plan, not only the plan itself, but a succession culture. How are you building your plan for your nonprofit moving forward? So we're excited to have everyone. Good morning, Caroline from Volunteer Odyssey. Renee Rainey with Delta Arts. Good morning. Good morning. As people are coming in, let us know where you're tuning in from. What organization do you represent? We're going to kick things off in just a few minutes. So while we're getting everyone settled, feel free to say hello to the chat. Tell us where you're tuning in from. We'll be keeping an eye on the chat for any questions. And we've got the handy Q&A feature as well lined up for you to ask our panelists anything that's on your mind. Good morning, Sharon from Experience Memphis Gardens, Dee Franklin from Binghamton Development Corporation, Kim from Experience Memphis Gardens. Thank you so much for joining us. We've got about 1 minute before we'll get started. I'm really excited to share our friends here today. We've got a great presentation on how to build a succession culture. This workshop, our Get On Board nonprofit workshops, are brought to you by City Current, but also the Assisi Foundation. So thank you, Ernestine Smith with the Assisi Foundation, for joining us this morning. Thank you for your team for providing these resources to be able to share all about great ways, professional, personal development in the nonprofit sector. If you're new to City Current, welcome to our family. Our mission is all about spreading positivity, uplifting your communities, and bringing people together through purpose-driven relationships to power the good. Power the good is the phrase of the day. It's the phrase of our mission here at City Current. And we host a ton of events, virtual and in person. You don't want to miss them. So head over to citycurrent.com after this presentation, click on community events, and you'll see what's coming up. We have lots of chances to connect, learn, and grow with us as we close out 24. And can't believe it's almost 2025. All right, we're about to get started. So get comfy, grab that notepad, and get ready for an engaging session. I can't wait to see where today's conversation takes us. Once again, thanks for joining us today. As you enter, you'll notice that you have the handy chat and Q&A feature. So once again, throughout the presentation, if you have time to ask questions or provide commentary, go ahead, throw it in the chat. Philip and Sanji will be focused on their presentation. So I'll be moderating those questions for you to be able to get them answered at the correct time. All right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for City Current's virtual Get On Board nonprofit workshop. I'm Andrew Bartolotta, the Director of Digital Media for City Current, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to today's session, which is focused on a critical aspect of nonprofit sustainability, building a succession culture. As nonprofit leaders, you understand that change is inevitable, especially at the leadership level. Yet, studies show that many nonprofits lack a formal succession plan, which it can also leave organizations vulnerable. And today, we're here to explore not only the importance of having a written plan, but also how creating a culture of succession can be a game changer for your organization. Our session, made possible by the Assisi Foundation of Memphis, Inc., is designed to be interactive and practical. We'll cover why building a culture of succession planning impacts not only long term sustainability, but also organizational health, funding success, and inclusive staff development. To lead this discussion, we're honored to have two accompanied experts who bring years of experience and a wealth of knowledge to this topic. So now it's my time to introduce them. First up is Sonji Branch. Sonji has over 2 decades of experience in the nonprofit sector as an executive leader, facilitator, and consultant. She's the principal consultant at Sonji Branch Consulting and is well regarded for her work in improving workplace culture and promoting diversity and inclusion. With certifications in nonprofit ethics, interim executive leadership, and DEI, Sonji is committed to helping organizations and individuals reach their fullest potential. As a facilitator and coach with Uplift Coaching and Consulting, she empowers teams to create positive, lasting change within their communities. Next up, we have Philip Walkley. Philip brings over 17 years of nonprofit excellence and executive experience and has served on numerous boards at the local and national levels. He's managed multi-million dollar funding initiatives, led board development processes, and has significant experience with diversity and inclusion training. His passion for empowering nonprofit leaders shines through his extensive background in guiding organizations, particularly faith-based nonprofits, through strategic and inclusive growth. Philip brings a unique and broad perspective to his work. So Philip and Sonji, thank you so much for joining us. Now is your time. Go ahead and present. We are looking forward to this presentation. Once again, for those that are joining us, go ahead and put any questions you have in the chat and we will answer them when we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Great to see everyone virtually, and we are really glad to be here sharing this really important topic and talking about it with you today. And as Andrew said, we're going to share some material with you, and then we'll have an opportunity for some Q&A back and forth at the end. So we'll look forward to hopefully dialoguing with some of you in that regard. So as we jump in, before we get into the material, I'm curious where all of you are in terms of, let me see, where all of you are in terms of your readiness for a leadership transition in your organization and your anticipation of a leadership transition in your organization. And so I'm going to put a question up here, excuse me. And the first question is, if there were a significant leadership transition in your organization in the next 12 months, would your organization be ready? And I was going to ask everyone for a show of hands, either on your screen or with your little virtual emoji. I don't know that I can see people's screens with the way mine is set up presenting, so I'll have to lean on Sonji and Andrew to tell me what they see. But I'm going to put 3 options up here with this question. If there were a leadership transition in your org in the next 12 months, would you be ready? How many of you think you feel like this guy, you're good to go, you're ready, you can weather any transition? Or maybe some of you feel more like this guy, maybe, I don't know, maybe we're ready, I don't know. And then anybody feel like this guy here, oh, scared to death. So if there were a leadership transition, raise your hand if you feel like you'd be the first guy, you're ready for it. All right, we seeing any hands? How many of you feel like you're right here in the middle? Kind of, maybe. All right. And then lastly, how many of you feel like this kid? You just want to run away, don't even think about it. All right, next question. Do you anticipate a significant leadership transition in your organization in the next 12 months? All right. If you feel like this first guy, yep, I know leadership's coming, transition's coming, we know it's happening. Anyone? All right. Next, raise your hand if you feel like the guy in the middle, like, I don't know, maybe there's a leadership transition coming, maybe. And then again, raise your hand if you feel like the guy on the end here, like, oh, don't want to talk about it, don't know. Sanji, did we get a variety of responses?
So unfortunately, I can't see the participants either, Philip. So sorry.
You know what? Well, good news. I can, and we
Great.
had several hands raised.
Good.
Looks like the scared baby is winning. So this is the perfect time to have this presentation.
That's great. Yeah, if we got even one hand raised right there, or really regardless of where you are on this spectrum, you're ready for it, you're anticipating it or not. I think what we're going to share with you today will help to strengthen your organization, not only for an actual leadership transition in the future, but even in the here and now before any leadership transition happens. So, with that, thank you, Andrew, for giving us that update. We're going to jump right in, and to start things off, we're going to watch a short video clip. So it's kind of lighthearted, but we're going to have a brief discussion after. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this short video clip.
Quarter cup at a time. A thin stream, it's supposed to be thin stream, blend it really well. Or you'll burn, David, that's not right.
Okay, well, that's because I'm ladling and stirring at the same time, and you're just standing there.
Now it's not. Bubbles. David, what does burning smell like?
All right. Oh, I'm trying to. There we go. Okay. Funny little scene, silly scene. But I think actually it has some relevance to what we're talking about today. If you had any coworkers walking behind your desk and watching you, maybe you can explain to them that this is actually an educational workshop and that you're not just watching YouTube videos at work. But the real question is what does this have to do with succession planning? What does making enchiladas have to do with succession planning? And so would love to hear from a few of you. So if you want to just, Andrew, are they able to come off mute and share? If anybody has any comments, would love to hear if anybody has any thoughts about what that has to do with succession planning.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead and add it to the chat. You can share your insights on what it has to do with succession planning.
Andrew, if they're going to drop it in the chat, would you be willing to share a couple of those out loud for us?
Of course, I will.
Great.
D says procedures should be documented for replication purposes.
All right. Thank you, Dee. Anyone else? All right. Well, I'm going to keep moving forward. If you have other thoughts, feel free to drop. Oh, I'm seeing some more maybe. Yeah.
Yes, we do. All right. Sharon says following directions are important for outcomes.
Hmm.
And Ernestine says, having a roadmap on what next steps are, not just a wish list, but an actual plan for how, who, and when the transition should happen.
Those are great. Those are great answers. Thanks everyone for sharing. Um, yes, all of that is true. And as you saw from this video, if you could tell, they had a recipe, right? And they had all of the right ingredients. But when it came to the actual processes and understanding how to make that recipe turn into enchiladas, there were some real things that were missing, right? David didn't know how to fold in the cheese. Moira didn't know how to tell him how to do it. It was written out. They had the ingredients, but they didn't really know how to make the enchiladas. And so that's what we're going to look at today. You've likely heard of a continuity plan or a succession plan. And a succession plan is incredibly important. It's essentially an action plan that outlines all the necessary processes and procedures for a leadership transition in your organization. They usually contain essential documents and processes and kind of map out all that should happen to make a healthy leadership transition whenever and however that occurs. And all of that is very important. A plan is very important. Documentation is very important. And we're not arguing that an organization shouldn't have a plan in place. But the reason we titled this session the way we did, how to build a succession culture, or you could say how to build a culture of succession planning as opposed to how to build a succession plan, is because we believe that creating a culture of succession planning is actually way more important than the written plan itself. What do we mean by that? So years ago, I was able to attend a multi-session training workshop on building a succession plan. And it was over several weeks. We got tons of valuable material and resources and templates that we were able to fill in important information and document important processes and outline all of that. All of that was so valuable. But honestly, my biggest takeaway from that whole time, and the thing that I actually implemented the most and used the most often and was the most beneficial anytime we had leadership transitions at my organization, was understanding that building a culture of leadership development, understanding that building a culture of leadership development is actually the most important part of succession planning. In other words, the best succession planning at its core is really all about leadership development. Yes, having a written plan in place is important. Yes, making sure job descriptions and program overviews and important documents are all there and present. All of that's valuable. But as we saw from that video, you can have a great recipe, you can have all the right ingredients, and still not really know how to make enchiladas. And I wonder how many great organizations are out there that have an incredible strategic or a credible succession plan in place and have an incredible staff team, but have not developed a culture of leadership development or a culture of succession planning that will actually enable them to have successful leadership transitions. And when that time comes, I wonder if they're looking at this succession plan and trying to figure out what does it mean and how do we actually do this, right? And so today's session is going to focus largely on the why and the how behind creating a culture of succession planning in your organization. Now, with that, and because we only have 1 hour, there's no possible way that we can cover every detail needed for you to put together a full actual succession plan. So, spoiler alert, you will not walk away from this session with a guide or a template and know every single thing you need to do to have a thorough succession plan in place. There are a lot of great resources out there. There are great virtual trainings and in-person trainings. There are great facilitators and consultants that can guide your organization through that process. And there are great resources on the web for building a succession plan. But what we do hope to do today is to give you a clear vision for the importance of building a culture of succession planning in your organization that helps make leadership transitions actually happen when they need to happen. And so we're hoping to give you a vision for that and also give you some practical tools and next steps and ideas to get started with that. So with that, we want to talk about the why behind building a culture of succession planning. So we have a few things that we've listed as why we think this is really important. And that's where we want to start. But I would be curious just to hear from a few of you before we get started. What do you think is a good reason that having a culture of succession planning in your organization is valuable? Why is that important? So if you want to if you want to just jot that down in the chat, and maybe Andrew can read that aloud as any of those come through, would love to hear what some of you think. Why is it important to build a culture of succession planning in your organization?
Philip, we've already got some coming in, so that's a great sign. Someone says, so that everyone is comfortable that your work will continue. Another person says to not lose progress. We've got to ensure someone is ready to grab the baton. And then we also have business continuity, continue the impact.
Awesome. Those are all fantastic. Those are all great reasons. Thank you for those who wrote those out. And we could, if we kept going, I'm sure we could list a whole lot more. There's a lot of important reasons why this is such a big deal and why it's so important. We've kind of honed in on 4 big buckets of what we think is important or why we think it's important. It doesn't mean that these are the only reasons, but these are one of the ones. These are the ones that have kind of bubbled to the top for us as what is most important in thinking about that. So I'm going to put those up here on the screen. The first is long-term sustainability and successful funding development. The second is organizational health and employee satisfaction. The third is effective governance. And the fourth is diversity and inclusion in staff recruitment and development. So those are the reasons we're going to focus in on today. And with that, I'm actually going to kick it to my co-facilitator, Sonji, and let her tackle this first one for us, and we'll keep going.
Awesome. Thank you, Philip, and good morning, everyone. I appreciate the comments that you all put in the chat because a couple of them tie directly to long-term sustainability and the long-term sustainability of your organization and the fund development that's needed. So I appreciate Dee's comment in particular, as she mentioned, being able to pass the baton. I'm not an athlete, but one of my favorite sports to watch during the Summer Olympic Games is track and field. And, I have seen enough Olympic Games to actually witness someone not handing off the baton in a way that the one receiving actually grabbed it. I think we've all probably seen that at some point. But when we think about this from the standpoint of long-term sustainability for our organizations, the work that we do because we have a passion for it, right? We're committed to the mission, we're committed to the vision, we're committed to the people that our organizations support. And so, as we think about long-term sustainability, we want to make sure, of course, that long after we're gone, or our senior director or our CFO, whatever that other person, whoever else in our organization we might want to bring to mind, we want to be able to continue our program and continue our work with little to no disruption. Short term, going back to what Andrew said as he kicked us off this morning, that change is inevitable. And when we think about short term, we often experience as leaders changes in staffing, right? Employees choose to, go on to other opportunities or whatever the reason might be. But when we think about building this culture of succession, we have to recognize that even in the short term, there needs to be a plan in place that ensures that whatever role becomes vacant for whatever reason, we have a plan to continue, continue those functions. And, as we recognize, we know that, and I think a lot of our participants here local to Memphis, there have been a lot of shifts in the funding in the philanthropic community in regards to how investments are made, and for better for worse. And when we think about funders and the need for for them to be confident in what we're doing, those plans are kind of like another one of those good housekeeping seals of approval that we can say, that we can have evidence of, that, yes, we are prepared for, and we're making sure that our organization, that our teammates, that everybody recognizes what to do in the case of. And I think the last thing that I will say in regards to the funder confidence is that, we recognize, again, with the shifts in the philanthropic community, that we have to be better stewards of the resources, but more importantly, we have to be mindful of the structures, the systems, the operationalized ways by which our organizations kind of have that strong foundation and or framework for doing the work. And when we do that, again, our funders are even sometimes asking some of these questions in grant applications or even in conversations that they may have with us as we're seeking those investments. So we want to ensure, one, that our staff, that they're equipped to be able to help to support and continue the programming, the work that we do in the short term. Long term, we want to continue to show that we have the SOPs, we have the systems in place to ensure ongoing programmatic efforts. And then finally, that our funders, want to continue to invest in the mission of our organizations.
Awesome. Thank you, Sonji. I'm going to tackle the next one here for us, which is organizational health and employee satisfaction as another reason why this is important. So Sonji alluded to this a little bit in talking about not only long-term, but short-term benefits of creating a culture of succession planning. I think when people hear the term succession planning, they typically think about future benefits, right? How it will help one day when that leadership transition happens, and if any of you responded like the third option on our survey at the beginning with the little baby running away scared to death, and we're like, I don't want to think about a leadership transition. I just want to put a succession plan in place and set it on the shelf and hope we never have to use it, right? The reality is, though, when we build a culture of succession planning, it can actually lead to benefits that help us be a healthier organization now and help build employee satisfaction now, not just in case of a leadership transition. Because our focus is on developing leaders within our organization. And so a great example of this, a LinkedIn article from this year points out that employees are more satisfied when leaders invest in their development, mentorship, or development offering training, mentorship, and opportunities for advancement. A commitment to employee growth fosters loyalty and engagement. And so if the best succession planning at its core is all about leadership development, then as we're doing that now, it's going to create more employee satisfaction today, not just preparing for a transition, but your employees are going to feel invested in, empowered, strengthened in their work today. One of the best ways to do this, one of the best ways to kind of first take steps toward building this culture of succession planning is this concept called cross-training. Now, when I think of cross-training, typically I kind of think of something like this, like a real wild, CrossFit gym exercise, people doing crazy things. But cross-training is not just for athletes. Cross-training can happen in the workplace. And in fact, Sonji and I have been really fortunate enough to work together to do some facilitation for a Fortune 500 company that highly values leadership development. And one of the ways that they implement their leadership development is through providing their teammates, their employees, the opportunity to cross-train. So if an employee wants experience or growth in another division from where they work or another department, they have the opportunity to shadow and learn from others and experience other job responsibilities to help them grow. And the beauty in that is that doesn't have to be reserved for Fortune 500 companies. That can be done even in small local nonprofit organizations. Finding ways to help your teammates, help your employees experience other skills and opportunities and responsibilities within the workforce that helps grow them as leaders. And so we're going to actually, in the middle of this section, we're going to pause for a really brief activity. So just where you are, I want you to think of one employee on your team. Think of one of your staff members. And I also want you to think, what are some of the skills or gifts of that person on your team? Okay, what are some of the strengths they bring? What are some of the things they're good at, right? And once you have that in mind, now what I want you to do is I want you to think of at least one task that you currently do that you could invite this staff person to join you in, to learn from you, to help you with, to shadow you. It doesn't have to be complicated. Maybe you write grants as a part of your role at your nonprofit. Maybe you invite a staff member to answer one question in a grant application and let you kind of proofread it before you send it off and give them that experience. Maybe you regularly meet with funders and donors, and maybe you invite this staff member to join you in one of those meetings just to see what it's like for you to interact with a funder. Maybe if there's a meeting that you regularly lead at your workplace, you can invite this staff member to help lead a part of that meeting. Or if there's email correspondence that you regularly engage in with a client or a partner, maybe you can invite this teammate to participate in that correspondence or write that correspondence out at one point. Again, it doesn't have to be big, but just thinking of ways you can engage your staff in doing things other than what they would typically do. So again, I don't want to pause too long here, but I want, because I want to keep going through the presentation, but I would encourage you to do what we just did here and then repeat it over and over again. So not just one staff person and one task you have, but what's another staff person and something else you do that they could join you in? Or what is some collective training and development that maybe some of my staff need in order to do some of these things, right? And I think that what you'll find is when you take these baby steps of allowing cross-training opportunities, it not only sets your organization up for leadership transition because you have more people that are able to do more tasks at your organization, but it actually builds organizational health now and employee satisfaction now as they are learning how to do more things and strengthening your organization. And then the last thing I'll say related to organizational health and employee satisfaction is, many organizations are really dominated by what we would call a hero leader, right? Someone who, is out front, responsible. Everybody looks to them for everything. But Tanya Allen, who is the former CEO of the Skillman Foundation in Detroit, and now she's the president of the McKnight Foundation, learned a ton about leadership development from her. She discusses this idea that she doesn't want to be the hero leader that's propped up and identified as the person creating and leading the change, but rather she believes her greatest contribution as a leader is to serve as a host leader. What is the difference? She sees a host leader as someone who creates a place for others to excel, to develop, to grow, and to demonstrate their own brand of leadership. So she's tried to move from hero leader to host leader, to creating an environment where everyone gets to thrive and grow as leaders. And again, when we do that, if we rely on one hero leader, when that hero leader is gone, guess what? It's really, really tough for the organization to thrive. But if we are serving as a host leader that is creating environments for others to grow as leaders, when the executive or leader of that organization leaves, you've got incredible leadership right in your organization that can continue the work that has been done. And again, that not only benefits transitions in the future, but it leads to incredible organization strength and health and employee satisfaction today. So with that, I'm going to kick it back to Sonji and let her talk us through the next one.
All right, and before I dive directly into governance, I do want to be mindful that we recognize that organizations, some of the organizations represented here on our call may be in different stages of their organization's life cycle. And so some of the things that we may bring to your awareness as we think about, again, building a culture of succession, some of these things may not be applicable to you because of where your organization is right now. And so I do want to name that. And particularly, I think that ties into governance in some unique ways. So in that same vein, we recognize that particularly as we think about life cycles, that some of us may be still in that building stage of our organization. Some of us may be in that kind of that middle stage where we've built it and now we're kind of on this track, this train that is running and we're going well. And then we may find that some of us are in that latter stage where yes, now that our organization has, had a healthy existence, a number of years or whatever, tenured existence. Now we're in this stage of we want to expand or we want to think beyond where we are right now. So depending on where you are, again, some of these things may or may not be applicable to you right now. So now it's very specific to governance. We know, and I love this image here, again, Schitt's Creek. And we can probably all identify situations where we've had positive experiences with our boards and maybe some not so positive. And in that, and thinking about that, we have to be mindful that our board members, our board have a significant responsibility for, the organization. They are the fiduciary of our organizations, right? And so I would assume that a lot of us in our respective bylaws, we have structures in place that our board members have term limits. And if not, maybe that's something you want to consider. Organizations as we think about succession planning and it relates to board members, if we do have those, and, those standards in our bylaws, it is important for us to think about how are we creating an environment where we know that every 3 years we'll have a number of our board members to roll up. What are we doing to create a system or a plan whereby which we're replacing board members and we have a pipeline of individuals who are as equally as committed to the mission of our organizations as we are. So again, it's transitions, thinking about board term limits and how we are effectively, proactively thinking about those transitions of our board members. And when we think about that aspect of governance as well, the process that we want to make sure that we're thinking about too is this anticipation of future leadership of our board, right? Hopefully your board, leaders, your board officers don't have a indefinite term of leadership, right? So how are we also preparing the next leader of our board? Do we have a clear pathway for those key positions on our board, our chair, vice chair, et cetera? Are we ensuring that, if we have respective committees, that those members of the finance committee, maybe the development committee, those individuals see that there could be or they have an opportunity to serve in leadership capacities as board officers, and then making sure that they have the resources that they need in order to effectively serve in those roles. And then the other piece that I will say to that is that when we think about this as it ties back to, again, funder confidence, I'm pretty sure a number of us have had opportunities to apply for grants or even have conversations with funders. And we're often asked, right? Tell me about your board. Are they supporting the organization? Do you have a plan for board leadership transitions, right? And so this aspect of governance is going to be key, again, for the long-term and short-term sustainability of our organizations.
Awesome. Thank you again, Sonji. We're going to keep rolling through here. And Sonji, also thank you for acknowledging, yes, just the realizing people are all different stages in their organizations, and we probably have all different size organizations represented. And so we are sharing a lot of information that might be overwhelming, but the hope is that what we're sharing can be beneficial regardless of where you are in that journey. The last big why that we want to talk about of why this is important is for diversity and inclusion in staff recruitment and development. So many nonprofits, unfortunately, really are not very diverse, even though many of them are serving incredibly diverse populations. And so I want to throw some statistics up here from nonprofit leadership in the United States, okay? Nonprofit leadership in the United States, more than 70% identify as white. About 13% identify as Black or African American. About 6% as Hispanic or Latinx. About 4% as Asian American, Pacific Islander, and less than 1% as Native American. And so even though nonprofits by and large are serving incredibly diverse populations, we see that the leadership of most of these nonprofits is really off balance, right? And so that's why representation is so important, because oftentimes people are looking to leaders in nonprofit organizations and not even able to see themselves in that role for whatever reason. And so I think if we look at this quote here, succession planning aims to develop your internal candidates by providing training and growth opportunities to all staff members. And this includes those who may be traditionally overlooked. A good succession plan will allow you to create a diverse leadership team from internal resources and succession candidates. So if we're not intentionally raising up diverse leaders from within our organizations, this pattern of homogenous leadership will probably continue. And that's why having a culture of succession planning in your organization can actually help the organization grow in its diverse leadership. Often organizations really only think about diversity in leadership when there's a leadership transition. But what if nonprofits took time to recruit and develop a diverse staff team, preparing them for leadership roles, right? I think about oftentimes especially in context with what I shared earlier about the focus on a hero leader, kind of a central hero leader for an organization. If there's only one hero leader serving as kind of the public representation of this organization that manages, that everybody connects the organization to, then are people going to be able to see even opportunities for themselves when they look at leadership roles in nonprofit organizations? So again, back to Tanya Allen, she says, leader is one who enables the vision, enables the creativity, enables the change, not necessarily the one who has to be in front of it. And when we do that, we're creating space for others to be seen as leaders within the organization. And then lastly, with this particularly, actions speak louder than words. This is, again, Tanya Allen says, we need to be clear on asking people, when you see these words related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, what do you mean? We should be pushing and challenging them. We've become good at the language of equity, but not the practice of equity. Have we enabled people to talk about it without really doing anything about it? And so again, we can talk all day long about the importance of a diverse leadership team, or about how we want more diversity in our leadership at our organizations. But until we are investing in that diverse leadership at all levels of the organization, then we likely won't see that diversity in the top leadership of the organization that we are looking for or hoping for in our nonprofit organizations. So again, these are some big picture reasons behind the importance of building a culture of succession planning. Again, of not just having a plan that sits on a shelf, but a culture within your organization that is building leaders and preparing for transitions at any point in the organization and in the history of the organization. So now we want to shift for the last little bit we have and talk about how to build that culture. How do we take steps to do that? It can feel overwhelming. And I will say this as I kick it to Sonji to take this section, building a culture is not something that happens overnight. You don't just walk in with a list of things you want to do, and then the next day, all of a sudden the culture has shifted. It takes a lot of work and a lot of time But if we take these steps over and over again, we can begin to see that culture change. And so for us as leaders in the nonprofit sector, in order to build this culture of succession planning, we have to be willing to own it. We have to be willing to engage the team in it, and we have to reward it. And so I'm going to kick it to Sonji to talk about these and unpack these a little bit.
All right, awesome. And so we didn't take a poll, and so I'm not sure if we have board members on our call with us this morning or not. Hopefully we do, but if not, still as leaders within your respective organizations, this is information that you can appropriately, share with your boards as well. So owning it first and foremost as the ED or CEO of your, or whatever, and I mean, not just say, senior leadership in that vein, but whatever your role is, but particularly for, the leaders of the organizations and the board members, we have to own that. You have to own that. You need to decide that building a culture of succession is a priority that you're taking, and you're not just delegating it to someone else. Depending on, again, the size of your organization, what the capacity is on your team, if it's a human resources, team, or someone who is particularly focused on human resources, there is support there. There should be support there. And of course, other leaders within your organization. The bottom line is your team will focus on what you focus on. Because again, go back to the point that we made earlier, that change is inevitable. And when we create the focus, or there is the energy, the understanding that again, we're committed to our mission, and we're going to make sure that despite whatever transitions happen, we're going to keep moving forward. Again, our teams will focus on that as well. And then the second one, engaging the team. When we think about this, I think about myself, and I think, some of us could probably concur with this thought that, we support what we help to create, right? So to the point too about the cross training, it's not just about the senior leader. Do you have a director of programs or some program manager? Again, another, a leadership role within the organization where there are opportunities for other teammates to shadow them and learn what they're doing. So again, that we have this cross functionality across our respective teams, so that again, we're being very proactive and strategic in ensuring that things can, the work can move forward, in case of a disruption. So how do we develop, and as Philip already mentioned, how do we develop the next level of leaders in our organization, right? This is not just about in case of, but then also, again, how do we build that continuity of leadership within our organizations? What talents and skills do we value most in a leader? How are we honing in on that, again, so that we create the space and the opportunities for those individuals to grow? And then what are some of the most critical roles in your organization that you need to create successors for? There are some roles that we know that if we are not careful, if they are not, if there's not someone literally on the bench, that can fill in or help to support that work, it could be pretty, it could be pretty impactful for our organizations. And then finally, rewarding it. How might we even think about building some of this into some of those performance review metrics, right? We have senior leaders within our organization. Again, I'm being mindful that we're all at different places and stages within our organization's life cycle. But, how do we reward it as we're, as team members, managers are evaluating staff members, directors, et cetera? How are we looking for those concrete ways by which we see that those individuals are helping to support, again, this culture of succession? Do we see kind of in that exercise that Philip led us in a few minutes ago, things that they are notably able to speak to that they have been able to pass off for another teammate to build into, their role, or build, at least have some understanding of those functions, right? So how do we then think about we reward it? So, there's, again, I think that we experience, unfortunately, more often than not, the complexities of the marketplace. Our organizations are forced to do a lot with little. And oftentimes, we don't make a whole lot of money, right? You know, we do what we do out of the passion for the mission of the organizations. And so to that point, we can't control the marketplace. And we recognize that, you know, we may not always be able to give our employees, you know, the amount of money that we wish they could have, right, in their salaries. But what we can do is think about how we help to develop them. Again, how do we reward them in other, you know, ways that may not necessarily be financial, but ways that help to develop them as future leaders within the sector.
Thank you so much, Sonji. That's great. Okay, so we want to wrap things up to get to some Q&A. I want to put a few questions on the screen for you to think about. We don't want to take a ton of time for reflection right now because we want to get to the Q&A, but I would encourage you to take these questions and set aside some time, maybe in the next week or two, even if it's just 30 minutes, to sit down and reflect on these questions as it relates to creating a culture of succession planning in your organization. And those are, first of all, how will you own developing a culture of succession planning in your organization? What will you, as a leader in your organization, whether you're on the board, whether you're the senior leader as CEO or executive director, or whether you're a program leader or, you know, program director, or, you know, a finance director, whatever your role is, how will you own helping develop a culture of succession planning in your organization? How will you engage your team in building a culture of succession planning, right? Again, as Sonji pointed out, we support the things that we help build. So how will you engage your team in building that culture? And then how will you reward it? How will you find ways to acknowledge and encourage and reward when you see your team taking steps to build and enact this culture of succession planning at your organization? And then with all of these things, I would say it can feel overwhelming. There's so many things you feel like you need to do. So the last question I would say to reflect on is, what is one practical next step you will take, right? And maybe it's that simple cross-training exercise we did. Maybe it's identifying one employee and one task and inviting them to join you in that just one time and seeing how that goes, right? Don't feel like you've got to do everything at once. What is one thing you can do, you know, in the next few weeks to begin building that process? So we want you to take these questions and reflect on them as kind of processing what we learned from today and hopefully enacting in your organizations. So look, it can be overwhelming. I know it can, but we know you can do this. I've seen it happen. I know Sonji's seen it happen. Again, in my organization that I led for 17 years, we had a written succession plan, but when there were significant leadership transitions, or even when I left the organization, the thing that I leaned on the most was this culture of leadership development as it relates to succession planning that we had built over the course of months and years at the organization. So I know that you can do it. Don't be intimidated. It is really lots of small steps that lead to this big picture thing. So we have to do this, though. We've got to create this culture of leadership, of succession planning in our orgs. It's really no longer an option in this kind of fast-paced and ever-changing nonprofit landscape. It requires a simple but comprehensive approach that includes and involves developing leaders at every level of the organization. And ultimately, creating that culture of succession planning not only prepares you for whatever leadership transition may occur in the future, but as we've seen, it actually helps your organization to be stronger and more resilient and more impactful even today, even when there are no leadership transitions. And so we hope that this has been valuable and helpful. We don't have a ton of time left, but I do want to turn it over to Andrew, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen to see what questions we might have for our time left.
Absolutely. All right. So let's talk about maybe what are some resources, either books, workshops like these, or tools would you recommend for further learning on succession planning and culture building?
So I'll jump in and shameless plug here, maybe not shameless plug, but I serve on the board of the Tennessee Nonprofit Network. And I will say, as a former leader in the sector, there were previous versions of this organization. And it has been they have always been a valuable resource for me as a leader. And even now, as we have embarked upon this statewide work, there's so much opportunity for collaboration, even beyond Memphis. And so, or wherever you are, again, you have the opportunity to connect with leaders across the state and get best practices. There are resources on the website. There are consultants. I mean, it's just literally anything an organization might need to help to strengthen, them and their capacity to execute upon their mission.
Great answer there. Okay, let's chat about overcoming resistance. What if there's resistance from current leadership? How can we overcome objections to succession planning or encourage leaders to think about future transitions?
Sonji, I could maybe say a few words about that, and if you have other things to add. I think so. I don't know for sure, but I'm hearing that question may be coming from someone who's not in a senior leadership role at an organization, which is great that you're asking that question. I've had almost the opposite question be asked before. I've had a leader say, "How do I develop leaders without them being worried that, oh my gosh, is he about to leave or she about to leave?" And so the way I pitched it with my staff is I never said, "Hey, I need to teach you this because I might be leaving one day." I pitched it as like, "Hey, as long as you're working at this organization, I want to give you as many opportunities to grow as possible. And so, I'm going to find ways to make you the best employee we've got here. And whether that's to one day serve in more leadership role here or in one day to move on to other things." So what I would say to the person that's maybe saying, maybe they sense there's a resistance in leadership for that, is for them to approach the leader and not say, "Hey, we need a succession plan," but more, "Hey, I really want to grow as a leader. And, I know that I have this role and I'm doing these things, but I would love the opportunity to learn and to have new opportunities. Are there things that I could do around here, or things I could shadow you in, or ways that I could learn more skills and experiences here at this organization so that I can grow as a leader and better serve this organization?" I think that's one approach that I would take if I were in the shoes of that person that's kind of desiring that, because even if that leader doesn't put an emphasis on succession planning, if that leader can start to coach and train and build up other leaders, then it's going to make the organization stronger, and it's going to prepare the organization for a leadership transition to some degree, even without an actual plan in place.
I think that's great advice there. And as we begin to wrap up, Sanji and Philip, what is maybe some words of encouragement or um, some yeah, let's go with some words of encouragement for those in the nonprofit sector as they close out 2024 and begin a new year of impact and advocacy in their sector.
Yeah, I will say that, we need the work of social sector leaders. It is more critical now, and I think than it ever has been when we think about the disparities that we face in our respective communities. And so with that being said, I encourage you to continue to, lean into those opportunities where there are resources available for you to, strengthen the organizational culture, to strengthen, your policies, procedures, all of that stuff. But then also I will say take care of you. This work is tough. This work, this is hard work at its core, and it's hard. It's hard. Take care of you.
If and in the last few seconds, thank you, Sanji. I would just add, especially if you're in a leadership role, anytime you think about adding something new or changing something, it can feel overwhelming. Like, how am I going to do this? But what I can tell you is with building this culture of succession planning, although it may take some extra effort and work on the front end, the more you do it, it's actually going to free you up as a leader. Because as you build leaders within your organization, they're going to be able to do more and more essential functions of the organization that free you up as a leader to focus more on long-term growth, development, and things like that. And so even if it feels like there's no way I can do this, I'm already busy, know that when you make that investment, it pays major dividends in the long run. And I can share that from experience personally, as well as talking to other leaders who've done similar things.
Well, Philip, Sanji, thank you so much for sharing your insights and tools with us today. Thank you for investing in our nonprofit leaders, exploring and deepening our understanding of succession culture. Once again, thank you for coming on and sharing your insights and your leadership. Thank you all for being here. And a special thanks again to the Assisi Foundation of Memphis for making this event possible. We have many events coming up, so make sure to check out citycurrent.com and click on community events. Once again, thank you, Sanji and Philip, and let's go power the good.
Thanks, everyone.